Wing Sprint Cars. I'm Steve Evans along with Brock Yates and Ed Bruce, and this is the B main. The first three drivers will transfer to the feature sprint car race of the day. And Brock, normally we would call these cars outlaws because of the big wings, but really outlaws is an association. This is outlaws, brother-in-laws, in-laws, sprint cars of all types from all over.
You got it, Steve. It's actually sanctioned by the same outfit that sanctioned the 320 Modifieds, the DIRT organization. That's Drivers Independent Racetracks, in case anybody's interested. And a good organization it is. But they bring everybody in here, and they change the rules around a little bit. We'll talk about that later as to what the difference is between the World of Outlaw Classic Sprinter and this here. We got some super modifieds in this show as well.
And these are really guys that have struggled a bit in qualifying. This is their last shot at the high-paying feature race to come. And remember, only the top three drivers will make it, so the pressure's on.
Absolutely. We got some good drivers in this field, actually. We've got Todd Gibson, who's had some Indianapolis racing experience. He's in one of the super modifieds. And in the back is Jack Hewitt, who's one of the very best. Looks like we got a green.
The green flag is out of the Thunder out of turn number 4 across the start-finish line for the first time.
In the lead is Lenny Krautheim. He came off the pole. He's one of the Pennsylvania drivers, and he's now in first place. But interesting, we've got a variety of cars up front. Right behind him is Craig Rankin. But in third place is one of the super modifieds. That's Gary Albritton, one of the Ohio super modified specialists. And that Dayglow automobile in fourth is Todd Gibson super modified.
And the grandstands here, Brock, you know, they're rooting for at least one of the super modifieds to make the sprint car feature.
They are. They run pretty regularly just up the road here at a beautiful 5/8 mile called Oswego. And those cars are quite a bit lower, you'll notice, than the classic sprinters, which are very upright race cars. But there's Leonard Krautheim coming down the back straightaway. He's being challenged right now by Rankin. And here comes Todd Gibson. Notice that big wing, but a very low race car. Good race for fifth, too, Steve.
That is between Steve Yodak and Frankie Kerr. Yodak in the 57Y car, the yellow machine in the front of the picture there.
Oh, look at this. Kerr trying to get down underneath Yodak, and he makes it work. That's a classic place to pass here, both with the modifieds and the sprinters going into turn number 1.
You know, even on the big mile racetrack, that steering wheel never sits still. You're constantly driving these cars, and there is the leader, Lenny Krautheim.
Well, they are very twitchy little short wheelbase light race cars, and you got to stay with them all the time. They just want to drive right out from under you and put you up in the cheap seat someplace. These cars are hitting well over 150 miles an hour coming down this long front straightaway.
And Brock, just now, coming out of turn number 4, you can see just a whole pack of race cars, and they're all battling for the 8th position. I mean, battling. 8K, Gene Kester, 37, Mike Thomas, Dave Wickham, number 35 is in there, Jack Hewitt, and 63 is the final car in that group.
As I said earlier, Steve, Hewitt is one of the very best of the USAC sprint car drivers. Came in here with a car that just isn't that competitive. So, here's somebody up against the fence. That's Robbie Hart from East Nassau, New York. You know, Steve, that's an unusual car because that's one of the very few Ford-powered automobiles in the race.
Well, considering the success of the Ford motor in NASCAR and road racing, you may see a lot more of them soon. You know, the sprint cars only race the mile distance once a year right here in New York State. A lot of changes have to be made to those cars. I took a look earlier. When you come to Syracuse off of a 6.5 miles, the first thing you're going to change is the gear in the rear end. The second thing is this wing. It is adjustable. You don't run the rake on the wing on a mile you would run on a half mile, simply because you have so much more air flowing over the wing at this speed. If you ran it down like this, you'd probably break it right off of the car. Some other things you're going to change is the stagger. In other words, you're not going to run as big a tire on the right-hand side of the car as you would on a high-banked half mile. This is a much flatter racetrack. Also, something that they really worry about on a half mile is balancing the wheels and tires. You're going to have to do that here because, again, of the tremendous speed. You're also going to change all of the torsion bars, make them much stiffer because, again, that wing is pushing down so much harder. And they tell me, Kenny Adams here in the 3A car tells me that any little change you make to a sprinter on a mile, you feel. On a half mile, you can make a great big turn on the torsion bar and not even tell the difference. But here at these speeds, everything is critical.
Okay, Steve, they've restarted Robbie Hart's Ford Sprinter. He's back in the field. Leonard Krautheim, the third, still leads it. Rankin in second. Albritton and Gibson, of course, are in the super modified cars in third and fourth place. A lot of people will be watching them as it looks as if we're going to have a restart.
And you won't have any trouble spotting those super modified cars. Albritton in third and Todd Gibson in fourth because the engines are down very low and offset to the left. In fact, the whole car has a lower silhouette.
Sure does, Steve, and they're carrying big block Chevrolets. Everybody else in the race, for the most part, small block Chevys. We'll talk about that a little bit later, as I said. There it goes. turn number 3. Right behind him is Rankin. But look at this. Frankie Kerr challenges Gibson for 4th spot. Can't make it stick as they come off onto the front straightaway. But here is Kerr once more trying to get underneath Gibson. Neck and neck as they head into turn number 1. Todd cuts him off and holds on to the position. Steve, notice that both Gibson and Albritton are adjusting those big wings on their super modifieds as they go through the corners. They're giving them an awful lot more downforce in the corners than leveling them out on the straightaways.
Some of the sprint cars as well have adjustable wings, Brock. But here is the race for 9th position. It won't pay much, but there's some good action going on. Gene Castor leading that field for 9th place in the 8K car, being challenged by 37 Mike Thomas.
Yeah, basically, this is for pride as Frankie Kerr tries Gibson one more time. Frankie has got to get not only by Gibson, but Albritton as well, because only the top 3 guys out of this race get into the big feature.
Well, that's the incentive for Gibson and Kerr to try to move up into that top 3. A 3rd place finish in a heat race like this is as good as a win in a lot of ways. The caution lights and flags are back out again. Again, the race will be slowed down, and for the same reason as before. There is Robbie Hart, that Ford-powered sprinter number 55, climbing out of his car the 2nd time now that he has spun on this mile track. But no damage to the car whatsoever. Robbie gets out just to have a look at the tires and try to figure out what is spinning around on him. We talked about Ford power in this sprinter. Well, there's a lot of different and interesting engine combinations. Brock Yates had a look earlier.
Well, earlier Steve talked about a sprinter being kind of a roll cage with a motor stuffed in it, and that's basically the case. But the motors, believe it or not, are of a wide variety. This is not a true World of Outlaws race, per se. This is kind of an open competition. The World of Outlaws permits a 410 cubic inch displacement limit. Bring anything you want. And most of those motors are Donovan aluminum blocks punched out to 410 inches. Small blocks. Chevrolets. Now, this particular motor, this is out of Ty Scott's car. He runs in the central Pennsylvania circuit. That's Williams Grove, Sealands Grove, Lincoln, Port Royal. That's a little bit different deal. They run a 467 cubic inch limit, and normally Tig runs an aluminum big block Chevrolet in his car. But the rules here at Syracuse require that he run like a super modified. Now, that gets a little complicated, but their limit is 467 inches with an iron block. So he had to stick an iron Chevy big block in this car to come up here and run at Syracuse. That adds about maybe 150 pounds of the automobile, and really presents him at a substantial disadvantage to the lighter, more nimble outlaw cars, which are maybe 200 to 250 pounds lighter, considering that they're not only carrying a lighter engine block, but less fuel on board. So there are a bunch of cars here, and they all have little differences that presumably give the Outlaws, in their classic form, the Swindells, the Wolfgangs, and whatever, a substantial advantage.
Well, the advantage everybody is looking for right now as we are ready for a restart is to pick up one of the top 3 spots. That's the only way you get to the main event to come. Leonard Krautheim has led every lap so far, and again, it's Leonard out of turn 4 first.
He's got a bunch of power, Steve. But look at this. Albritton challenging for 2nd place, and so does Gibson trying to get by Craig Rankin. In fact, they both do. Probably, Steve, an advantage that those big block Chevrolets have in terms of just torque on that restart.
Well, Brock, Todd Gibson, the 03 car, may have his hands full, because I noticed coming down the front straightaway that there is a broken sideboard on that wing.
It sure is. So that may be a handicap to Todd as he tries to maintain stability. That car is really not that well suited for this kind of a dirt race anyway. As we said earlier, that's designed specifically for asphalt competition. So Todd's got his hands full, but right now he's hanging in there in 3rd spot, but being challenged once again by Frankie Kerr, as he has for the entire race.
Well, the wing can't work properly because the air is spilling right off the right side of it.
That's right. And here comes Kerr.